About 200,000 Bedouin live in the southern part of Israel, the Nakab, which is a mostly arid land covering 60% of the territory of Israel. About half of them live in unrecognized villages. Most of these villages have existed before the State of Israel was even founded, but the Israeli authorities consider the residents of these villages to be intruders. The Bedouin in the villages are Israeli citizens. Some of them even volunteer to serve in the Israeli army, but the state refuses to connect the unrecognized villages to the power grid, to running water, to roads, or to build health clinics and schools in the villages. Instead, on June 24th, the Israeli parliament, the Knesset, has passed the Power Begin law to destroy these 40 villages, to confiscate their land. Bedouin will not be allowed to live west of road number 40, in order to prevent them from accessing the best lands in the Nakab, and in order to establish a wedge of Jewish communities to separate between Arab communities on the west and the east. Between 30,000 and 40,000 people will lose their homes. Partial compensations will be offered to the Bedouin who have been using the land and claim ownership of it.
First of all, this report is discriminate between Arabs and Jews in the Nakab. Jews have different alternatives of living here. Jews can reside in a city, in a town, in a rural community, in kibbutz, in moshav. Even they can reside in individual farms, while Bedouins have to push to townships to be urbanized. The Power report is discriminating between Bedouins and Bedouins, while offering some compensation in land for those Bedouins who are living on their lands, okay, and deprive that from Bedouins who kicked out of their lands in the 50s of the last century, immediately in the first decade after the establishment of the State of Israel. Most of the Bedouins actually lived in northwest of the Negev, of the Nakab, okay, and they were pushed from that area.
The extreme right Jewish Home Party added another addendum to the law in the last minute. The Bedouin will have a limited time to collect their compensations. If they fail to do so in the time specified, they will lose their eligibility for any compensations. The Bedouin were not consulted regarding the plan, but the new addendum puts an extra pressure on them to take the compensations quickly, an act that will be interpreted as acceptance of the plan.
אנחנו כרגע אומרים בגדול לא לפראוור, לא לתוכניות הממשלה, לא להריסת בתים, לא לעקירת עצים, הכרה מיידית בכל הכפרים, לעצור מיד את חקיקת החוק הגזעני. אי אפשר להכריח את הבדואים, רק הבדואים לגור בעיר, כאשר אין לנו אופציה אחרת. ליהודים יש אופציה שיכול לגור ביישוב חקלאי, הוא יכול לגור ביישוב כפרי, הוא יכול לגור בעיר. לא יכול להיות שיש תוכנית מיוחדת לרכז את כל הבדואים כרגע ביישובים קטנים ועניים, כמו רהט וכמו כל היישובים. אנחנו לא מדברים על הסדרת התיישבות, מדברים על עקירת יישובים, מדברים על 40,000 אנשים הולכים לעקור אותם מבתיהם בכוח ולהעביר אותם למקום לא ידוע.
This plan is the latest in a series of efforts to complete the ethnic cleansing project of the Nakab, a project known in Israel as the Jutification of the Negev. In 1948 and again in 1951, the Israeli army has deported thousands of the Nakab's residents. 12 Bedouin tribes were forcibly expelled from Israel. In 1991, the Israeli government approved the Wine Road Plan, allowing Jewish farmers to establish about 100 very large farms with government subsidies in exchange for keeping Bedouin out of their land. Because Bedouins can almost never receive building permits, they have no choice but to build their homes illegally. The Israeli authorities, especially the Israeli Land Administration and the Jewish National Fund, JNF, lead a house demolition campaign against the homes which Bedouins build without permit. In 2005, over 30,000 homes had a demolition order. During 2011, about 1,000 homes were demolished. Israeli blogger Yossi Gulvitz reports that according to a recent poll, Israeli society has been fed misinformation about the claims of the Bedouins. 93.8% of Israelis had no idea that the Bedouins claim ownership to only 5.4% of the Nakab's land and thought that they wanted more. Although Bedouins are today 30% of the Nakab's population, and although they used to own nearly the entire Nakab, they are now being driven off the tiny piece of land which they used to sustain themselves with. A third of the Knesset members never bothered to show up for the vote. No member of the Likud party agreed to explain what the vote was about. The law, based on a government decision from September 2011, won the first reading by a margin of 3 votes. The government and the media continue a campaign of incitement against the Bedouin, painting them as criminals. One Knesset member, Dani Danon, claimed that in 2011, 1,000 women and girls were seduced, kidnapped, or enslaved by Bedouin, even though the Israeli police did not record even one such case. The Jewish National Fund, the JNF, plays a key role in the Judification of the Nakab. The fund secured a donation from the God TV evangelical Christian television channel to plant a forest on the land of the El Arakib village in the Nakab. The bulldozers rushed to demolish the village's structures, and the residents rebuilt. The bulldozers came again and again, so that the village was demolished over 20 times. The JNF owns a great deal of land in Israel, and also in the Nakab. The charter of the organization specifies that the JNF can only use the land for the benefit of Jews. The Israeli state decreed that the land has to be managed by the Israeli Land Administration, which is a state institution and is therefore officially not allowed to discriminate. But on June 30th, the Israeli Ministry of Housing decreed that the JNF will manage its lands on its own. The 600,000 acres owned by the JNF in Israel will therefore become apartheid land where only Jews are allowed to live. This is Shir Hever for The Real News.